Stand up.
Well, hello, and sorry I am late for work. There was a ton of traffic between my two bedrooms here. It is Wednesday. It's the 4th of March, and there is a lot of news to get to. I have a great guest joining me today for the first time, a scholar, an author, a journalist who spent much of his life reporting, writing from the Middle East. He now works at the Century Foundation, which is a pretty interesting think tank that was founded in 1919. Their mission statement is to foster opportunity, reduce inequality, and promote security. And today I talked to senior fellow and director of Century International, Thanassis Cambanis. I think I'm saying his name right. It's Greek, but he is American, speaks perfect American, and real smart, super helpful, loved his insights, got along great, and that conversation begins today at 45 minutes into the show after news and headlines. But first, like every day here at Stand Up, on the audio version of the podcast exclusively, you've got a great news recap. I've got tons of headlines and clips to give you context on everything that happened yesterday, from outcomes and analysis on the war in Iran to a very combative hearing on Capitol Hill, where the Department of Homeland Security and woman who killed her own dog, Kristi Noem, got confronted about that by a Republican senator, Thom Tillis. You got to hear that clip. And, of course, yesterday there were primaries in Texas, in North Carolina, and Arkansas. We've got big outcomes and controversies already from last night's election. So lots to get to. Let's start with the war. Seems like one of the big headlines has to be that Americans are being told to get out of like 15, 20 countries in the Middle East, but there's no way out. And the Department of State, that's their job, and they have not done it. And so seasoned scholars and diplomats from around the world are going, holy shit, what an absolute clusterfuck. All of us saw this coming. We always have contingency plans in place. Others blaming it on the massive cuts that DOJ made to the operations that would help there, including, by the way, Voice of America, which normally would be functioning in Iran, telling the people whatever our propaganda would be. But that's run by that outcast Carrie Lake, and she probably has very little budget and personnel to carry out that propaganda. Maybe that's a good thing, because the other huge story was that we learned that a whole bunch of commanders in the military, high-ranking military officials, were unsurprisingly Christian nationalist rapture kings. Headlines everywhere similar to this one at The Guardian. U.S. troops were told war in Iran was, quote, all part of God's divine plan, according to the religious freedom group, Military Religious Freedom Foundation, who run by Mikey Weinstein. I've talked to him before. It's a legitimate organization, and they do everything they can to make sure those serving in the military have the freedom to be or not be religious. U.S. military commanders have been invoking extremist Christian rhetoric about biblical end times to justify involvement in the Iran war to troops, according to complaints made to this watchdog group. That's what we've got on it so far, and we will learn more in the days and weeks to come, obviously, but it's unsurprising, seeing as that the Secretary of Defense is himself an absolute Christian nationalist nut. We talked last week about his pastor, Doug Wilson, who was at the Department of Defense just last week giving a prayer. So maybe they want to bring on the rapture. Maybe this is what it's all about, end times. I'm not scared. You're scared. I'm actually doing pretty good with it. I don't know why, but I have a fairly healthy mindset that whatever happens, happens, and we have to accept it. But also, I'm going to do everything I can to fight and to continue doing my work here to inform you and connect each other, and to be, as I've always said, the change I want to see in the world. So that's where I'm at. I've got good purpose and mission, which keeps me motivated. Now let's get to some of the stories, more stories out of yesterday from around the world and the war in Iran that the Israelis and Americans decided to just start a war of choice. Yesterday, apparently, Iran named a new Ayatollah, and then Israel immediately threatened to eliminate him. They said he would be a, quote, unequivocal target. So there's that. Reuters is reporting that the U.S. financial services industry is on heightened alert for potential cyber attacks amid the unfolding war in Iran. I've been hearing a lot of people speculating about that would be a lever they could pull, I guess literally. Firms stepping up monitoring for threats that often rise during periods of geopolitical conflict. So that's to be expected, but we'll see if anything happens there. Obviously, we're all going to know that. That would affect us very quickly, as would gas prices, which are going up to above $3 a gallon average. That's how it's taken. People were posting on Facebook, not where I live. Well, it's not the same. I mean, do I have to explain gas prices? They're not the same. They're not the same from one gas station across the street from the other. Don't believe me? Ask my dad. He knows exactly how much gas costs at every gas station within a 20-mile radius of his home. And let's see, what else can I tell you? CIA station in Saudi Arabia was hit by a drone. Iranians are looking at that as a major triumph, a symbolic victory for the Islamic Republic as it lashes out at U.S. targets and personnel across the Middle East. Yesterday, our commander-in-chief ordered the U.S. Navy to the United States government to provide risk insurance for the Gulf maritime trade and said that the Navy will escort tankers through the Strait of Hormuz if necessary. Well, that should go well. I think that makes a lot of sense and sounds real safe and easy to do. Oil supertanker rates rose to all-time highs following Iran's vow to close the Strait of Hormuz, and oil prices have spiked as a result of potential interruptions, of course. Well, it looks like the French are getting involved. French President Emmanuel Macron yesterday ordered France's nuclear-powered aircraft carrier to move from the Baltic Sea to the Mediterranean to help protect Allied assets during the war in the Middle East. So here we go. Do they only have the one? They moved their aircraft. Do they have more than that? I don't know. It's great that they do. I'm really excited. Thanks for all the help. And, of course, tensions are flaring on Capitol Hill as lawmakers are questioning the Iran war costs, risks, and strategy. Got a lot of clips for you coming up. But Marco Rubio is obviously at the center of this. And, by the way, his presidential aspirations are going to rise and fall on this, don't you think? But he pushed back on his own suggestions a day earlier that the president decided to strike Iran because Israel was going to do it first, which everybody says that's crazy and doesn't make sense and means that Israel's in charge of the U.S. And I mean, I've heard that interpretation from so many military and foreign policy experts. So make of it whatever you want. The Pentagon released the names of 4 killed troops yesterday. Said they died in a drone strike in Kuwait, and everybody's already making a big deal about the fact that their base was not fortified and ready for a drone attack, and that there were no warnings given that they supposedly have ways to do. So much more news coming out of the war. I'll do my best to recap it every day. I've got to find the most efficient ways and sources to trust, but I'll do my best. Also, yesterday back in Washington, Capitol Hill, the hearing did not go well for Homeland Security Secretary and woman with a new face, Kristi Noem. Quote, at least one GOP senator laced into Kristi Noem's stewardship of the Department of Homeland Security as she testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee on Tuesday, calling her tenure a disaster. Yeah, that was Senator Tom Tillis, who did even more than that. Speaking of discouraging developments for Department of Homeland Security itself and encouraging ones maybe for the rest of us, a federal judge has revoked Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem's ability to restrict members of Congress from entering ICE facilities. This is a huge deal. On Monday, the judge ruled that Noem's requirement that members of Congress give her a week's notice before entering an immigration facility is, illegal, given that it relies on funding from Congress. Warren could not be used to block oversight from lawmakers. How about that? And even more news on Department of Homeland Security. They've opened an internal investigation into a report that little fella, that little Keebler elf Nazi, Greg Bovino, senior border patrol commander, made disparaging remarks about the Jewish faith of the top federal prosecutor in Minnesota during an immigration operation in the state, and also an investigation related to Bovino in Minnesota. Apparently, the use of the chemical irritant by him is among 17 instances of potential unlawful behavior by federal agents during what they called Operation Metro Surge, which no one in Minnesota will forget, and which is still going on, by the way. And it's currently being investigated for criminal charges now as a result, according to the county attorney there in Minnesota. So lots of news there from Department and about Department of Homeland Security. Learned yesterday that Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick has agreed to appear before the House Oversight Committee that you just saw Hillary and Bill Clinton appear in front of to discuss his ties to convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein And he's going to have to answer questions from Democrats on that committee. So that will be interesting. I'm not sure exactly when they've scheduled that for. A lawsuit worth watching. Yesterday, Minnesota sued the Trump administration in an attempt to stop it from withholding $243 million in Medicaid spending, as I said, would happen here, warning it may have to cut health care for low-income families if the funding is held back. Lawsuit asked the U.S. court in Minneapolis to issue a temporary restraining order to block withholding from Medicaid, which is the health care safety net for low-income Americans, of course, especially there in Minnesota, where they are doing their best to carry out the main theme of the Ayatollahs, both administrations, which is cruelty is the point, right? More headlines. Moderna agrees to pay up to $2.25 billion to settle a COVID vaccine patent dispute. Okay, they're arguing about the patent, and they lost. And I like to see what's trending. And yesterday, Smoothie King was trending. So I was like, what's this? Some of you might have heard about this if you're on social media, especially. Following an investigation into an incident apparently involving a guest in Michigan at a Smoothie King franchise who was wearing like a Trump sweatshirt. The franchise owner refused to serve them. And so the Smoothie King corporate headquarters reached out and they took immediate action, and they are no longer with the business, along with 2 employees apparently at that location. So it's a few black women, I think, one of which owns the franchise, and they did not want to serve. There's got to be probably something more to the story, but even if there isn't, it was a huge story yesterday on social media. Smoothie King going to take a bit of a hit, and you got to be concerned about that whole story there. I'm sure it's ripping up right-wing media. Oh, and you can't forget the elections last night, and the takeaways from NBC News are Tuesday's primaries across 3 states saw incumbents wobble, general election matchups form, and runoffs extend inter-party fights. They also highlighted broader lessons about the state of national politics, from President Donald Trump's enduring power over the GOP to the disagreements over ideology, generation, and strategy that continue to divide Democrats. In Texas, where the Republican Senate primary is heading to a May 26th runoff now. All right, so this guy, John Cornyn, he's been there for 4 terms. He's voted with Trump. He's a huge Trumper, MAGA, but not enough. He's going up against the criminal Attorney General Ken Paxton. You got to wonder if that's why he did so well, because he's a criminal. They like criminals. And the question of whether Velveeta Corleone will finally take a side, swirling over the race after other races demonstrated his power. Meanwhile, James Tallarico won the highly contested Democratic primary over Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. They were colleagues in the Texas House or Senate, I think. And now he has won that primary. A night of close calls and losses for House incumbents in both parties was full of nail-biting signs for other establishment figures preparing to go before voters later this year. Yeah, old one-eye Dan Crenshaw, he lost his primary, which was interesting. There was a controversy in Dallas as well last night, which is worth mentioning. The Texas Supreme Court stopped Dallas County from counting late votes after confusion over the new rules, is the headline at CNN. That is a story that I haven't fully read into or understood, but definitely want to learn more about it, because it looks like they're trying to steal the election in Texas, which is shocking. And a huge Latino voter surge for Democrats in heavily Hispanic counties along the Rio Grande Valley in Texas. Democratic turnout was big. Texas 34th district, where Trump won 52 to 48% in 2024, roughly twice as many voters participated in the Democratic primary compared to Republican primary. Sad to see my friend Allison Jaslow lost her primary in North Carolina, but she's the best. Whatever she does next is going to be better than everything she's done before. I love Allison. And the Democratic Senate nominee in North Carolina is now former Governor Roy Cooper, an open seat because Republican Tom Tillis is retiring. The Republican aiming to replace him was Michael Whatley, former Trump Republican National Committee chairman. So those are just some of the results and outcomes. Oh, scandal-plagued Tony Gonzalez's race is going for a runoff, which is good because it means he's going to stay in the House, not resigning, and we will get to bash him and everybody supporting him every single day until that runoff in May. All right, now those are the headlines that I've gathered for you. Let's get to the clips I got from yesterday. Do want to remind you, this is an ad-free show, so it doesn't have ads that you need to fast forward through. Say you're on the rowing machine for 30 minutes or any other, maybe you're running a power drill, or maybe you're even making a meal and you've got gloves on because you're dealing with raw chicken. Any one of those things, you don't want to hear a commercial that you got to fast forward through. It happens to me all the time when I'm listening to the podcasts, and I don't have commercials here. No ads. This show is supported entirely by you, the paid subscriber. Please sign up right now, patreon.com/Pete Dominick. If you already signed up, please consider paying more. If you can, upgrade your subscription from $5 to $10 or from $10 to $25. Whatever you find you're getting a lot out of this, especially if you're listening every day, you're participating on the Discord platform or at our Hangouts. Hope to see you at Podjam in person. That's Thursday, April 9th through 12th. And send me all of your ideas, your compliments, and your critique like I got from Sean Nielsen. Very helpful, Sean. I responded. StandUpWithPete@gmail.com. I hope that that was reflected in the promotion I just read, because Sean's the guy on the rowing machine. Okay. I do 10 minutes on the rowing machine. He does 30. That's pretty impressive. Let's get to the clips, and let's start with some laughs. It's Stephen Colbert on The Late Show explaining it all last night, and I thought we needed this one to start after all those headlines.
We are on day 4 of what we here at The Late Show are calling a war with Iran. We're trying to keep it simple because it's confusing enough already. The United States and Israel continue to bomb them, and Iran is launching counterstrikes at the U.S. and its allies in the region. Yesterday, the U.S. Embassy in Riyadh was attacked by 2 drones, and today a drone targeted the U.S. consulate in Dubai. Thankfully, there were no injuries from the attack. But the State Department is taking no chances. They say Americans should depart now via commercial means from Bahrain, Egypt, Iran, Iraq, Israel, the occupied West Bank and Gaza, Jordan, Kuwait, Lebanon, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Syria, the United Arab Emirates, and Yemen. And let's go to the official announcement.
There's Syria, Lebanon, Israel, Jordan, both Yemen, Kuwait, and Bahrain.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Marco Rubio. One problem with his evacuate order, depending on the country, flights out of the Middle East have been either extremely limited or stopped entirely. And earlier today, multiple U.S. embassies told Americans they cannot evacuate or help them get out of the Middle East. But if they can't leave, then what are they supposed to do? Just wander around the desert? We all know why that took Moses 40 years.
I refuse to ask directions!
It's increasingly clear that this administration did not put a lot of thought into what happens after the initial boom. Insiders of the Pentagon are warning that if the fighting goes on too long, U.S. air defense stockpiles could run out. The USA could run out of bombs? That's like the USA running out of pumpable cheese. It's who we are.
I love that last joke, and I also hate it, but it's true. Jimmy Kimmel makes a similar joke coming up. But let's now go to James Tallarico, who made this 2.5 minutes or so speech before I think the polls closed, but I guess he felt like he knew he had it in the bag. Here he is, the Democratic Senate primary leader in Texas, James Tallarico.
Tonight, our campaign is shocking the nation. We are still waiting for an official call, but we are confident in this movement we've built together. Every vote must be counted. Every voice must be heard. The voter suppression in my home county and in Congresswoman Crockett's home county underscores the gravity of this moment. This movement is about whether the people will hold the power in this state and in this country. We launched this underdog campaign 6 months ago in my hometown of Round Rock, Texas. And since then, tens of thousands of Texans have shown up to rally with us in every corner of the state, from Beaumont to El Paso, from Amarillo to Brownsville, and everywhere in between. We have recruited more than 28,000 volunteers who are organizing in every community across this state. And we have shattered grassroots fundraising records, all without taking a dime from corporate PACs. This is a people-powered movement to take on this broken, corrupt political system. This is truly a campaign of, by, and for the people. We are not just trying to win an election. We are trying to fundamentally change our politics. And it's working. The number of young people who showed up to vote in this election is unprecedented. The number of Texans who have never voted before but showed up in this election is unprecedented. The number of independents and Republicans who voted in this Democratic primary is unprecedented. This is proof that there is something happening in Texas. Tonight, the people of our state gave this country a little bit of hope. And a little bit of hope is a dangerous thing. I want to thank y'all. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being in this fight. God bless y'all. Thank you.
All right, there's James Tallarico last night. I wanted to give you, most of what he said last night. And now I want to go to a couple of senators who were briefed on the war in Iran yesterday, and they sounded pretty scared and pretty sure that there was a plan to put American members of our military on the ground, boots on the ground, as they say. I hate that phrase, but in Iran. Let's listen to Senator Elizabeth Warren after that briefing.
I just left a classified briefing on Iran, and here's what I can say. It is so much worse than you thought. You are right to be worried. Trump administration has no plan in Iran. This illegal war is based on lies, and it was launched without any imminent threat to our nation. Donald Trump still hasn't given a single clear reason for this war, and he seems to have no plan for how to end it either. Like a lot of you, I am really angry. I am angry at what Donald Trump is doing, and I feel grief for those already killed in this unnecessary conflict. And I will keep doing everything I can to fight to end this war.
There you go. That's Elizabeth Warren. And here is Richard Blumenthal, was also in the same briefing, Democratic senator from Connecticut. Take it away, Dick.
I am more fearful than ever after this briefing that we may be putting boots on the ground and that troops from the United States may be necessary to accomplish objectives that the administration seems to have. But I also am no more clear on what the priorities are going to be of the administration going forward, whether it is destroying the nuclear capacity of Iran or simply the missiles or regime change or stopping terrorist activities. And I think the administration owes it to the American people to have briefings not just for members of Congress, but for the American public. Nothing here should have been classified. It should be available to the American people.
When you listen to Democratic senators talk, some of them are not the most articulate. Some of them are like older, especially a lot of these older white guys and a few of the women as well. And they're just not quite as charismatic, but they're all pretty smart. And they're all much better, generally speaking, at talking about difficult, nuanced issues that they have to deal with than Republicans. There's obviously a lot of Republicans who are real good at talking. They're just overwhelmingly dishonest and corrupt, but we could name plenty of them. But it's just such a different – there's no real true idiots, I feel like, Democratic senators. Not that there haven't been in the past. There certainly have been. But right now, is there someone that is a Senate Democrat that sounds like a total idiot? Because in the Republican, they got a couple of them. Of course, you got Tommy Tuberville for sure. But this guy, Mark Wayne Mullen, man, he is dumb as a box of stones. And I love that NPR reporter, I recognize her there, known her for a long time, Lisa Desjardins, calls him out in this clip. I think you should be able to hear it all. Here he is, Senator Mark Wayne Mullen of Oklahoma, a real dolt.
You'll concede this is war. You'll concede this is war.
We haven't declared war. They declared war on us, but we haven't.
War, Secretary Hicks said
we haven't declared.
Just now, you said this is war.
They've called it war.
They've called it war. What I was saying. Okay, well, that was a misspoke. What I was saying that they've declared war on us, but war is ugly. It always has been ugly. But we're taking out a regime that's been trying to attack us for quite some time.
But you're not.
All right. Well, I might have said war, but I misspoke. It's not a war. It's a war. With nobody that knows anything about anything doesn't understand that this is a war. But listen to how it's talked about. CNN put together this great montage. Unfortunately, it starts with Groper Cleveland himself, but it's only a few seconds of him, and then it's other Republicans. Some you'll recognize, some you won't, but I promise you they're all Republican elected leaders who don't know which way is the war.
And we may have casualties. That often happens in war.
I don't know if this is technically a war.
We didn't start this war, but under President Trump, we are finishing it.
This isn't a war. We haven't declared war.
The Secretary of Defense, who calls himself the Secretary of War, said today this is a war.
We set the terms of this war from start to finish.
Nobody should classify this as war. It is combat operations.
War is hell and always will be.
Strategic strikes are not war.
I guess the Congress people that you saw in that clip are all convinced that it's not a war, because that would mean that they would have had to have done their job beforehand to authorize this. But it does seem like we're in a war.
Yes, Abby. Yes, that's Abby Phillip on CNN recapping it there. All right, listen to this. This is crazy or very insightful. You might not like Pod Saves America. You probably don't like Rahm Emanuel, the former mayor of Chicago and Barack Obama's former chief of staff, but he has always been a proud Jewish American, big supporter of Israel. But listen to what he has to say about how much damage Bibi Netanyahu has done.
Israel has never been more strategically secure since Ben-Gurion was dancing the Hora in 1948 in Tel Aviv, but more politically vulnerable. I had never in my life that I thought that a prime minister of the state of Israel would lead Jews back into the ghetto. And that's what's happening in Israel, that's what's happening in the world, and that's what's happening around the world. Jews can't go to Europe and participate in Eurovision, while the UAE is hosting the world financially in F1. He has literally, in the way he has executed pieces of the last, not just the last 2 years, but over his time, isolated Jews in Israel. The fact of the matter is, this is the best strategic terrain Israel's had since the founding. You have peace in Jordan with Israel. You have peace with Egypt. Syria and Lebanon basically call it non-belligerence. You can use whatever label, but it is in more secure place than ever before. Iran is on their back foot. I do want to spend time on this because I think one of the most unreported stories right now is the collapse of Iran, not just strategically, imploding in society. You don't really have in the near geography a strategic threat. Second, when we were starting in politics, the Gulf was all about just oil. Today, they want to be part of the world economy, which is what Israel's ace is. The UAE, Bahrain, Oman, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia want to use their petrodollars to be part of the global economy and their citizens to be part of the global economy. That is an invitation for Israel. And they're pissing it away with this prime minister.
Yeah. Wow. Powerful from Rahm Emanuel. I thought when I saw that, I got to share it with you. So there's that. And now let's go to the senator from Georgia. It's Jon Ossoff. He's talking about those we lost. And this is what a president normally sounds like. This is what a leader normally sounds like, but we don't have them right now. I think Jon Ossoff is going to be the nominee. That's what I predicted. It's early, but I like to put my money where my mouth is. And also my mouth where, okay.
Today in wartime, And so on behalf of all Georgians, I express our grief at the news Americans have been killed and our deep sympathy for the spouses and children and loved ones of those who have made the ultimate sacrifice for our country. And with immense gratitude for all who serve, we pray for the survival and recovery of the wounded and for the safety and success of American service members engaged in combat. The United States Armed Forces are the world's most capable military, and our Commander-in-Chief has no more solemn responsibility than the stewardship of their lives. Sending Americans into combat should be a last resort in the pursuit of vital national interests. 8 months ago, President Trump lied to the country when he falsely claimed to have obliterated Iran's nuclear program. Now he says he's taken the United States to war for regime change, without evidence of imminent threat, without having exhausted diplomacy, without clear objectives or a plan for the aftermath, and without the consent of Congress. The American people overwhelmingly oppose another open-ended regime change war in the Middle East. And the president owes Americans a real explanation for his decision to take this nation to war. 2 a.m. posts on Truth Social just aren't good enough when you're sending Americans into combat. The president was dancing at his beach club the same night he ordered air crews to launch into combat, and hours before our service members endured missile salvos. But our Constitution reserves for Congress, not for him, the decision to go to war. George Washington wrote, quote, "The Constitution vests the power of declaring war with Congress. Therefore, no offensive expedition of importance can be undertaken until after they shall have deliberated upon the subject and authorized such a measure." And so I intend to support this week's War Powers resolution to assert the proper authority of Congress over war and peace and to rein in the administration.
All right. There you go, John Ossoff. And I got to play you this very embarrassing for Will Cain clip on Fox News yesterday. He had such a run-up building up to the guest, the question for his guest, which is one of those Fox News generals, General Jack Keane, and he just listen.
It's not 100% clear to me, General, and that's not to suggest that I don't support 100% what is happening, nor that I 100% offer my support. I just think I want to ask a couple of critical questions, and I hope you know how much respect I have for your service, and I think it goes without saying to anybody watching how much respect I have for the men making this decision.
You don't have to patronize me. Just ask the question. Go ahead. Come on, ask it.
To be clear, General, I'm not patronizing you. I'm trying to have a very serious conversation in front of the American people.
All right. Thanks, Will. So cringe and also awesome. Also, speaking of awesome, this is the Republican Senator Tom Tillis. He's on his way out. There's Kristi Noem sitting in a chair in front of him. And he says this. If you haven't heard this, this is probably the best thing I've heard in a while.
I read your book last week. And honestly, some of the parts of it impressed me, but some of it distresses me. And I'll give you a good example of one that does. The passage where you talk about killing a dog that was 14 months old. I train dogs, all right? And you are a farmer. You should know better. You should know that if you're going out to a hunting lodge and you're putting pheasants out and you're putting dogs out, you don't take a puppy out there. A 14-month-old dog is basically a teenager in dog years. You decided to kill that dog because you had not invested the appropriate time in training, and then you have the audacity to go into a book and say it's a leadership lesson about tough choices. It's in your book. We could play it if we had time. At that same lunch hour, you killed a goat. and you killed the goat because you said it was behaving badly. You are a farmer. You don't castrate a goat. They behave badly. You should have probably done that before. But my point is, those are bad decisions made in the heat of the moment, not unlike what happened up in Minneapolis. I expect we're an exceptional nation. And one of the reasons we're exceptional is we expect exceptional leadership. And you've demonstrated anything but that in the time that I've seen you responding to the emergency in North Carolina and across the Southeast, and acknowledging when mistakes are made, and speaking too soon for the expedient of social media or whatever it is.
Oh, wow. We get to hear that guy rip Republicans in the Senate oversight hearings from now until November. I like it. I'm for it. There's Tom Tillis. Here's a little bit more, by the way.
So why am I disappointed with Secretary Noem? Because we're not going after enough people who did this damage at the expense of running numbers that Stephen Miller wants out of the White House. We just want numbers. We want 1,000 a day, 6,000 a day, 9,000 a day, because numbers matter, right? No, they don't matter. Quality matters, not quantity, quality. And what we've seen is a disaster. Under your leadership, Ms. Noem, a disaster. What we've seen is innocent people getting detained that turn out are American citizens. I could talk about the culture that's been created here with Stephen Miller aiding and abetting. I heard first reports that he was the one that said it was a domestic terrorist situation where 2 people lost their lives in Minneapolis. I've heard that report. Maybe you can refute it. I don't know that we'll have time for you to respond because I'm giving you a performance evaluation here. I'm not looking for a response. And I'm saying, Ms. Noem, that time after time after time I've been disappointed. But before I get back to looking at the vicious people that did this damage to these families, I want to talk a minute about FEMA. You have a policy right now that anything over $100,000 has to go through your desk for approval. I asked my staff, because I'm a management consultant, I don't try to do cheap shots in here, but the facts do not lie. This is your administration for FEMA response. This is President Trump's first administration. Which one would you like to have? If you're a state that has a $60 billion disaster, your biggest disaster in South Dakota that I can tell that when you were an elected official was about $500 million. So 1/100th of this single storm where thousands of people are hurting in North Carolina and you're just barely catching up. This is what competent FEMA leadership looks like. This is what incompetent FEMA leadership looks like. And people are hurting in Western North Carolina from the most significant storm they've ever experienced. This is what we need more of. I'm convinced you can't do it. If you're requesting a review of $100,000 and up, then it begs the question, why? Why would you be involved in that? Why would that be a policy? And in a minute, I'll ask about some people that are involved, some special government employees. Why are they involved in it? Thank you.
Senator,
no,
that $100,000 only had to do.
And I will hold the clock until I finish.
Okay. She did not fight very much from what I saw. The clips that I saw, she did not fight very much. Those are just 2 clips. There was so much more. Peter Welch from Vermont, Sheldon Whitehouse, and even John Kennedy, Republican John Kennedy, had very hard questions for her and made her look terrible. And it looks like they're looking for somebody to let go of. Who's it going to be? I say it's going to be her. I'm going to go make a bet on one of those betting sites that you can bet on life, on politics. Okay, let's go to our friend, comedian and commentator, Trey Crowder. We love Trey, and here is his latest car rant. I try to include all of these.
Blind before they got... You know, back in my day, if you wanted to start an unjust war, you had to lie about it for at least a little while first. I feel like there was like 2 years of lying before they got us into Iraq. Dude, nowadays they just do the war first, figure out the lie later. I think it slipped their mind they'd even need to lie. They just walked into Trump's office early Saturday morning like, it's done, sir. We've bombed Iran. That's great. Thank you. Sure. What should we tell the American people? Who? them. Oh, I don't know. Who gives a shit? You'll figure something out. And then they've just been throwing shit at the wall since. At first they're like, oh, that's because they had nukes. And it's like, really? You really going with the exact same lie that everyone hated about Iraq? That's a bold strategy, Cotton. What's next? You going to say they're weapons of bigly destruction? See if that sticks? And then for a minute it's regime change. We're liberating the good people of Iran. It's classic bleeding heart Donald Trump. If there's one thing he can't abide, it's seeing the downtrodden masses being oppressed by tyrannical government, particularly when those masses are brown and Muslim. That really upsets him. It's like, come on, dude. Also, I'm not sure if anybody wants our help. You seen what our help looks like? These Iranians are over there giving everything they got for their future in their country, and all of a sudden schools start blowing up, body parts raining down, blood in the streets. They're like, Jesus Christ, what are you doing? And America's just standing there like, we're helping. This is how we help. Isn't it fucking sweet? It's like, stop helping. Right? And there's some people think that this is like a wag the dog situation. You know, that for years, during the Obama administration, Trump said that Obama would start a war with Iran to boost his approval ratings and help win elections. So clearly that's what Trump is doing for himself today. But like, I don't think that's going to work. Isn't half of MAGA's whole thing isolationism? You know what I mean? Like, America first, isn't that what they say, right? What are they going to say? Like, no, by America first, what we meant was like, in response to the hypothetical question, who gets to bomb the Middle East? America first. Like, we get to go first, and then Israel second, and then whoever wants in after that is fine. But America's first. That's what that meant. Which, by the way, that's kind of what Rubio said yesterday. He said we knew that Israel was going to do it anyway, and we just got real bad war crime FOMO, so we had to jump on board, you know. So can't wait to see those propaganda posters. Uncle Sam wants you to die for Israel's paranoid bloodlust. That'll have them lining up. But look, whatever the lie they land on, whatever the truth may be here, I just want to know how this is going to land with the American people, particularly in the MAGA world. Some of them are going to get on board. They always do. But you have to think at least some portion of them could walk away as a result of this, right? Just like we've been told that some portion of Hispanic Trump voters have walked away, and young podcast bro Trump voters have walked away, and that, you know, people who hate pedophile Trump voters have walked away. And the $1 million question is, will it be enough to matter during the election in November? And the $1 billion question is, will there be an election in November? Right? Because some people think that's what's going on here, that this was done so he could suspend elections during wartime, and I don't know what the hell is happening. But if that is the case, if this whole thing has been done with the aim of literally upending democracy, then something tells me he's going to have more than one unnecessary fucking war to worry about. I'm just saying.
Yeah, there you go, Trey Crowder. Good as always, great as always. Now let's wrap it up with a little more Colbert, and a little sprinkle of Jimmy Kimmel, and then we'll get to my amazing conversation.
It's important to remember that Trump has pledged for years to keep the U.S. out of new wars. So it's no wonder that voters aren't jumping automatically on board here. According to a new CNN poll, 59% of Americans disapprove of the Iran strikes. But what if Americans found out that God wanted this war? Because, according to more than 100 grievances from U.S. military personnel stationed at dozens of sites across the Middle East, U.S. commanders have told troops that President Trump is, quote, anointed by Jesus to light the signal fire in Iran to cause Armageddon and mark his return to Earth. Well, that's one exit strategy. Up.
Yeah, there you go. Crazy story. I'm sure many of you have seen that. A couple of you have sent it to me. Hopefully I'll talk to Mikey Weinstein from the Military Religious Freedom Foundation, or there'll be more reporting on it for sure. Very, very important. Finally, here's Jimmy Kimmel last night on ABC's Jimmy Kimmel Live.
President Donald Trump did find time between bombings yesterday to post what the New York Post called apocalyptic footage of San Francisco under Gavin Newsom. The Ayatollah is pulling out all the stops lately. Team Trump was on Capitol Hill today to brief Congress about the strikes on Iran. Usually that happens before we invade a country, but technically only Congress has the power to declare war. But also, technically, you're supposed to get a permit to tear down the East Wing of the White House. And they're not going to get bogged down in technicalities with this group. The president sent a letter to lawmakers in which he claimed that it is too soon to know the full scope and duration of this conflict. Now, on Sunday, he said it could last 4 to 5 weeks. Yesterday, he said it could be more than 4 to 5 weeks. Today, he said it's too soon to know. And tomorrow, we'll be shooting for Christmas, I guess. However long it takes until everyone stops talking about how many times his name is in the Trump-Epstein files. That's how. And one of the concerns. One of the concerns that has been raised is that dropping all these bombs could deplete our weapons reserves and put us in a tough spot if another conflict were to arise somewhere else, like if Greenland decides to launch a preemptive attack. There are reports that the reason we've been moving so fast with this is that they want to finish the job before we run out of munitions. But don't worry, President Donald J. Rumsfeld says we are locked and loaded for the long haul. He says the United States munition stockpiles have, at the medium and upper medium grade, never been higher or better. As was stated to me today, we have a virtually unlimited supply of these weapons. Wars can be fought forever and very successfully using just these bullets. Oh, good, the war can be fought forever. That's exactly what we wanted to hear. Just like the war his stomach is fighting with his pants. It will go on. Now, listen, I'm not an expert in this, but I'm pretty sure our military doesn't have unlimited weapons. It's a stockpile. It's not the buffet at the Golden Corral. You know, last night I mentioned that the only good thing I could say about Trump, before Saturday anyway, was that he didn't start any wars. And I'm not the only one who felt this way. We found this op-ed from the Wall Street Journal in 2023, written by a senator who said he was endorsing Trump because, quote, I know he won't recklessly send Americans to fight overseas. And that senator, you know who that is? He's not a senator anymore. Now he's the vice president, J.D. Vance. That's same fellow who called Trump America's Hitler. Good thing for J.D., his boss does not read, so he should be okay. This is all very tricky.
All right, there you go. Kimmel last night, and now it's time to get to my guest for today. He's a senior fellow now at the Century Foundation, which specializes in the Middle East and U.S. foreign policy. His most recent book, Once Upon a Revolution, an Egyptian story, was published in 2015. It chronicles Egyptian efforts to create a new political order. He also wrote A Privilege to Die, Inside Hezbollah's Legions and Their Endless War Against Israel. Author, journalist, scholar, really happy to have him joining me for the first time. Oh, and you can watch this on YouTube. We were live yesterday, youtube.com/standupwithpete. Go watch it. Go subscribe. Time to talk to Thanassis Cambanis. I nailed it here, but not in front of him. Listen.
I have a really smart guy joining us today to talk about the most important issue I think that we're all thinking about and trying to learn as much as we can. Few people that are better to talk to than my guest now. Professor Thanassis Cambanis is how you say his name. I think I got it close. Professor
Cambanis.
It's great to see you. I've been reading all your stuff. I hope everybody goes over and checks out all of your work, and a really interesting organization, the Century Foundation. Just talk a little bit about the organization that you've been working with for a while, because I was digging into the work that you guys do and all the experts that you have over there. Really good stuff. Tell us a little bit about that.
Century was founded in 1919, actually, by a progressive department store magnate, Edward Filene, who believed in equal wages. Yep, Filene's Basement, that guy. He believed in equal wages for workers, and he believed in peace over war, supported the League of Nations, was a big supporter of the New Deal, did a lot of promotional work for FDR in the New Deal time, and left this legacy of these beautiful ideals that we mostly honor in the breach in America today.
It's really interesting organization, and obviously history. And you yourself have written a couple of books, articles everywhere, appeared all over the place, but you've been talking about and living in the Middle East and covering our kind of forever wars for a really long time. Talk to us a little bit about where you lived and what you covered.
Sure. And let me just take one more beat to plug the fantastic work of my colleagues at Century. So Century today has a really breadth of people who work on progressive issues, a lot of things like educational access, discrimination in healthcare, affordability crisis. And then my team, Century International, is a group of people who are mostly based in the Middle East. We do long-term, deep field work, and the whole genesis of our work is to say to American policymakers, if you're going to muck around in places like Iraq or the Gulf or Lebanon or Israel-Palestine, you should know what the impact of your policies is for people who actually live there. And our researchers are people who actually live there. For a long time, I was one of them. I spent most of my adult life in Iraq, Cairo, Jerusalem, Beirut, and some in Damascus. And that's my perspective is shaped by being an American in these regions that are real places full of real people who have agency, and at the same time often end up powerlessly on the receiving end of really crappy decisions, either made in Washington or in Tehran or in Riyadh or one of these capitals.
We in America are so apathetic about the Middle East, about Arabs, Muslim world, what the difference is between, Arabs and Persians, Iran and Iraq, Sunni and Shia. We hear all this terminology. There's so much diversity in that part of the world. Like you said, you've lived and covered all these different countries. How do you talk to an American about the region, specifically now as we have stepped back into it, which is just shocking and crazy that we're here talking about this today? But how do you talk to Americans about this very diverse region when we hear all different kinds of things, and then we kind of all lump them together? It's hard for Americans to understand, but also I believe we have great responsibility to understand.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we try to meet people where they are, and we try to give people grace if they don't know things, but at the same time, we need to hold people accountable who dehumanize others, right? So that's the kind of starting point. When you ask me, how do I talk to Americans? It depends on what they're asking, because some Americans are genuinely curious. They have fears maybe of terrorism or fears of the other, but they are also curious, and they understand that, let's say, Palestinians are real human beings, equal human beings. Now, there are other folks who don't think of Arabs and Muslims and Middle Easterners as fully vested human beings, and I've kind of run out of ways to try and bridge the gap with those folks. I mean, it became really apparent during the war in Gaza and the war crimes and eventually the clear genocide unfolding there, that there are folks for whom no Arab life, no Palestinian life actually has the same value as an American life or white life, and that's a hard one to talk through, because our shared humanity needs to be a starting point for a discussion about, like, do we need to be bombing the hell out of Iran right now? Well, if you don't think of the Iranians who are dying under this bombardment as fully vested people, then you and I are going to have a difficulty having an exchange of views.
And it's so true. And I didn't want to believe that. I kind of almost wanted to say that, but we don't see them as human. And it's very easy to dehumanize folks whose culture you don't share, whose culture and history you know very little about. Although, when we're talking about Iran and Iraq, it almost feels like, if you don't know anything, where have you been as an American? We've been tied up with these countries our entire lives. When I saw that this girls' school had been bombed, I mean, I haven't stopped thinking about that. Just that, when I think about the humanity of it all, not to mention the fact that several different cities in Iran had been bombed in the last couple of days, and Americans have no idea what that's like. I mean, I was in New York on 9/11, but that wasn't the same for a lot of different reasons. I think it's important that we talk about the humanity, and I'm glad that you mentioned that, and I just wanted to kind of highlight just how I've been thinking about it. Anything to add there?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, not to detour too heavily, but I think it's important for sort of grounding the conversation in our understanding of the Middle East as like a real place with real people living in it. I raised my kids in Beirut. They went to preschool, elementary school there, and it's a rich, fun city. There were 1 million plus Syrian refugees there at the time, in a war raging 90 miles away in Syria, but it's a normal functioning place, like most places, even in times of war. And every time I'd come home, people would say, "Oh my God, aren't you scared being there in Beirut?" They thought it was still 1982, that Americans were getting kidnapped by Hezbollah and taken with a bag over their head, or buildings getting blown up in downtown Beirut. And of course, that was true in 1982, hasn't been true for decades. And it's really important that we have some, I think, a little bit of humility, but also a lot of, like, let's do the work. We're the most, as Americans, we're citizens of the most powerful country in the world, and we make a mistake, 100,000 Iraqis die, and those of us who were worked there or served there in the armed forces or in the diplomatic corps or in the humanitarian space. Maybe someone like me, I continue to go to Iraq multiple times a year to this day. We're still watching. Most Americans stopped watching a long time ago. And, we can't blame them morally necessarily, but we did that. We caused the harm. And then decades later, the Iraqi state is laboring under the burden of all these militias and kleptocrats who are misgoverning their country and robbing them blind, and often working together with the worst elements of the Iranian regime. And that all is happening because of a series of events we triggered. And that kind of leads us, I don't want to preempt where you're about to take our conversation, but that leads us to the insane folly of where we are today with this embarking on this war of choice against Iran. We know that at a minimum, any kind of war creates a cascade of unintended consequences. Yes. So even the most ideal scenario, it's unpredictable. It's deadly, it's destabilizing, it's unpredictable. And that's if it goes well, all kinds of things, mostly harmful, happen that no one could have predicted. That is the one thing you can, with 100% certainty, guarantee in the event of a war or an invasion. So here we are taking on a country 4 times the size of Iraq when we invaded Iraq, with no plan, less planning than the bungled catastrophe and crime of the invasion of Iraq. It's astonishing to me. I mean, I expected it. I actually published a piece on, I think 2 days before the war started, warning against it because I had heard that it was coming, but I still refused to really believe that we would do something this stupid until we did it.
Yes, I can't believe we're here. I just can't believe that this is happening, that they went through with it. You wrote a piece, I guess, last year. I think it's important just to go back to, because it matters so much. Yeah, back in, March 23, titled, "In Breaking Iraq, America Broke Itself." And you're also writing in the most recent piece about how this invasion in Iran contributes to the destruction of our democracy at home. Everything is connected, and people don't necessarily realize it. Make the case, though, that in breaking Iraq, America broke itself.
So, I always want to make sure I start with the most harm, which was the harm caused to the people who live in Iraq. So that, that's always first and foremost in my thoughts. However, as an American, I look at what happened to our own society as a result of embarking on this forever war. So, we did a couple of things in committing to a war of folly in Iraq. We broke a generation of service members who we had serving 1, 2, 3, sometimes 4 or 5 tours, knowing that if they survived in body, they would often come home with very hard to live with maladies caused by fighting these wars, out of sight, out of political consequence, on our behalf. And we brought back the norms of a lawless battleground. So in Iraq, the Americans who were dispatched there, whether they were service members in the military or contractors or civilian overlords in any of the various bureaucracies set up, they were told to act with impunity, indifference to the people whose lives they were controlling, and that's how we got things like the Abu Ghraib scandal, which some of your listeners might be mercifully, happily too young to have lived through as adults, but where, to our undying shame as Americans, members of the military tortured Iraqi detainees, photographed them in horrifying, humiliating positions, and collected these photos as war trophies. But there were cases from the most extreme, rape of children, murder of civilians, to criminal negligence, the dismantling of the Iraqi state, the blowing up of its security apparatus, its ministries, and things from which nearly a quarter century later people are still picking up the pieces from. The men and women who did that work, the work of unmaking a society, brutalizing and humiliating people with no accountability, with impunity that was ordered, the impunity was given to them by their superior officers all the way up to the president of the United States, who themselves practiced and enjoyed that impunity. Unsurprisingly, completely predictably, these people came home. Some of them continued in service, enlisting in police departments, working in the government and other places. And no surprise, we find them in Ferguson shooting unarmed protesters. We find them in American cities shooting unarmed black civilians. We see them on January 6th breaking into the Capitol and in other places too. Now, of course, this is not what happened to every service member, but the problem with an illegal war that's centered on impunity and abuse is that the weak links or the folks who are have a proclivity towards brutality or predatory behavior are supercharged and given official cover.
Yes.
And then they came back to the U.S. and were continued to be empowered in that way. And now today we have a state, we have a democratic erosion at the highest levels in our government, where not just the president, but all kinds of elected officials and civil servants do not feel accountable, do not feel bound by the law. They don't feel bound by Supreme Court decisions. They don't feel bound by any kind of morality or values-based provision. And interestingly, sorry to go on so long, but some of the most powerful voices on this debate are folks who have served, right? So you have hypocrites like, I shouldn't name them in order to be somewhat apolitical, but you have veterans who opposed forever wars, but now in positions of power have decided some forever wars are just fine.
Well, J.D. Vance would probably be the most, I think. J.D. Vance, who served and is the vice president, who was very much outspoken against the Iran war, any invasion of Iran. So was Tulsi Gabbard and other people in the administration themselves who served.
Right. Until it was time to get in line behind this reckless war. But we have a lot of other folks who served who have been very overt now, members of Congress who are veterans who, because they risk their lives in combat zones, are able and willing to stand up to this insane orthodoxy of armchair forever warriors.
I'm actually just kind of surprised that there is. I mean, I guess it's very unpopular. I'm now talking about Iran. Very few Americans support this. It seems like we learned our lesson, at least on the forever wars, the war on terror, because of Iraq, because of Afghanistan, because of the results of those two wars, because of a generation of broken veterans. You mentioned, the things that they have to deal with, not to mention just the suicide rate, addiction, unemployment, domestic abuse, divorce. It's impossible.
These are long tail harms of war. These are casualties of war, as sure as if they were shot on the battlefield.
As sure as they were shot on the battlefield. I think it's a really important way of saying it. But overwhelmingly across political lines, it would seem America was against this kind of invasion. And I wonder what you think in terms of how the administration didn't even try to sell this, didn't even mention it in the State of the Union. This is not like George W. Bush's wars in the Middle East, where they sold them for a year or more. We had propaganda. This is so much different, and it's also an air war overwhelmingly so far in these first few days. How would you compare and contrast then and now?
Well, let's start with the proposition itself, and then let's get to the procedures that are so off the wall. So, does it make sense for the United States to go to war to unseat this noxious regime in Tehran? To me, it's clear the answer is absolutely not. Right? I mean, the people ruling Iran, they're terrible. They kill peaceful protesters. They stir up hornets' nests around the region. They're bad actors. Absolutely, a terrible regime. Like many terrible regimes out there, but they're one of the extra troublesome regimes, and we don't like them. We have various interests in containing their ability to cause harm. The beginning and the end of our interest is containing the harm they can cause to our direct interests, and when it's possible, without going to war, to the interests of our allies. That's all there is to it. And frankly, I mean, I wouldn't want to see Iran having a nuclear weapon, but the whole idea, I mean, bad regimes have nuclear weapons. North Korea has nuclear weapons. Pakistan has nuclear weapons. Pakistan, a longtime U.S. ally, although with a lot of problems in that relationship. So to begin with, there is no reason whatsoever for the United States to go to war with Iran, and there never has been. Now, the leadership of Israel has been trying to persuade the U.S. to join a war against Iran since, at least to my knowledge, the days of George W. Bush. And every president until this one has rebuffed that as a ridiculous and reckless claim, right? We don't go in and try and unseat governments that we don't like. It's just not it's not in our interest. It isn't done because it is toxically dangerous, right?
I mean, there's just a huge track record of our country and others, but especially our country, getting rid of regimes we don't like and having them replaced by regimes that are worst in recent history, right? I mean,
well, and even, I mean, I think it's really important to say, even if it were going to, like, quote unquote work from the vantage point of like a regime change proponent, like, I guess there are people, fans of Kissinger or of our wars in Latin America, who would say from their vantage point that killing Allende and putting Pinochet in charge of Chile worked from an American interest. I would say even those things, which, I think those were the wrong thing, that's the wrong thing to do. Also, those things ruined us as a society by dint of doing those interventions, and they broke those societies that we intervened in and made them poor allies and poor partners and bad places to live, right? So even when they supposedly work, they don't work. And what you're mentioning in our recent history is that it's a murderous disaster. It's a bloodbath. We create power vacuums. I mean, Iran today, to the extent that it's a problem, a security threat in the region that it's in, it's because we went in and destroyed Iraq. So until 2003, Iran and Iraq balanced each other out. They might not have been great places to live for the people who live there, but they really didn't have much bandwidth to cause problems beyond their borders. Fast forward to the annihilation of the Iraqi state by the bumbling U.S. invasion and occupation, and suddenly Iran is supercharged. Right. They gain access to all the resources of Iraq, which they brilliantly leveraged, and over the course of 20 years, thanks to American ineptitude, overreach, and forever wars, we turned Iran into a regional power that, by the way, was not a threat to American interests. I mean, that's the thing to keep hammering. As bad as Iran was, and I, as someone who lived in the region and saw a lot of people suffering at the hands of Iran-supported militias and bad Iranian policy, I am not sympathetic. I don't think of Iran as some kind of global resistance avatar that should be admired by progressives. Iran was a terrible dictatorship. However, not a direct threat to the United States, and by no means a state that we needed to invade in order to keep ourselves safe.
I don't want to simplify the history of Iran and Iraq. Everybody knows about their disastrous war where millions died, on both sides. But it would seem that the worst foreign policy or geopolitical consequence of the U.S. invasion in Iraq in 2003 should always be mentioned, and you just touched on it, was that it empowered Iran in a way it never would have been, because Iraq and Iran, to simplify it, kept each other in check to a certain extent. But when the U.S. invaded and got rid of Saddam and his Ba'athist friends, there was a lot of sympathetic people in Iraq to Iran, I think, because of ethnic loyalties to some extent, right? I mean, like, nothing empowered Iran more than the U.S. invasion of Iraq. And then add to that a hard-fought negotiation between that the Obama administration got, John Kerry and Wendy Sherman and all these other people who are outspoken today talking about that agreement, was ripped up by Trump, and Trump won. So the history, the recent history, seems to matter just as much as anything else. How am I doing?
And bringing this up, I think raises a really important point for progressives, right? So, I'm a progressive. I'm a universalist. I believe in every human being has equal rights to life and prosperity and security. No one by dint of the country they were born in has less of a right to live free from war and free from hunger. These are free from genocide, right? These are important values for me. And, I'm in my mid 50s, early 50s. So I came to political consciousness at a time when the Cold War was ending and we were watching genocides unfold in Rwanda, in Bosnia, and other places. And many of us thought the United States should use its power, including its military power, for good, to stop these genocides and to help, and to help suffering people in bad states, right? So the sovereignty of foreign states was not the be all to end all. You wouldn't say like, well, if some state is slaughtering members of one of its communities wholesale, we don't say, well, the sovereignty of foreign nations is the supreme value, so we just have to stand by and watch it happen. Now, it turns out it doesn't work. Our experience intervening, and arguably the times we did intervene or that other countries intervened supposedly to protect people from war crimes or genocide, in each specific case, you could argue it wasn't really sincere. It was because some other interest came into play. But I would say that the case was tested, right? The idea, in some cases, Bosnia, Rwanda, Somalia, Kosovo, there was at least some element of like good faith in why those interventions were made.
Right.
And they did not work. They did not lead to good outcomes. But what they did lead to was a hubris that that underwrote the forever wars after 9/11. And as an American, I mean, it's not my place to say whether Iraq is better off from an Iraqi perspective. It's their life to make a judgment on. I can say as an American that what we did to Afghanistan and what we did to Iraq, we absolutely shouldn't have done. We, in the case of Afghanistan, after decades of war, we left the people of Afghanistan right back under the thumb of the Taliban, with all the worst predations that were in place right before 9/11. And in Iraq, it's a much richer country, and for some Iraqis, it's a much safer country today. There is an amount of accountable governance in place. So some Iraqis I know say that what they have now is worth the price they paid in blood, but I can say that was not our job. That was not our role.
Well, it's not where it wasn't worth it for us then, and it certainly isn't worth it now. And
it isn't the right thing to do. I mean,
morally,
like if you could say to me that we could commit a bunch of war crimes in Iran, and you had a crystal ball and you told me that as a result in 10 years the average Iranian will be better off, I would say, I'm glad if that's the case. We should not invade that country and kill a bunch of people in order to create the possibility of some kind of positive change, especially when history tells us for sure that what we're really creating is the likelihood of a lot of chaos. So there's maybe a 20% chance of something good coming out of this. There's an 80% chance of something terrible coming out of this.
Yeah, very well said. I think the most important thing I've learned is that Americans unfortunately just don't care, and it's because we don't have to. We don't see the cost of war. Less than 1% of Americans serve. We can do whatever we want, and it doesn't affect our lives. There's no draft. There's no national service. We don't see the financial extent of it, at least not directly. It gets all put on the credit card. And therefore, we can continue to have these military interventions and wars. But even if there continued to be no direct costs, and I think our time runs out on that, even if that was to continue, you would still want to have majority support for any kind of intervention.
Well, what do you make of the polls that show that this time around? So, in the Iraq War 2003, this is, by the way, one of my favorite tidbits. Not only did people believe the lies, but to this day, the majority of Americans believe that Saddam had nuclear weapons and was connected to the 9/11 attacks. Two things which are not true and were provably not true. But anyway, what do you make of the polls now, which show that less than a quarter of Americans support this war? Does that give you any hope, or how do you interpret that?
It gives me a lot of hope, because I it's what I thought would be the case. You have to sell any idea that you want, whether it's a true idea, a lie, or demagoguing immigrants or not. You still have to sell it. This was not sold. Like, you have to sell the American people a major military intervention.
No idea, no plan. They just did it. They're just winging it.
But I also think that on this issue, Americans are somewhat emboldened because Trump won. Week one or something, he just kills their top general, and there's hardly any consequences or repercussions. Then last year, we bombed the shit out of the mountains where their nuclear weapons are apparently are. Again, no consequences or blowback from the Iranians against Americans. We just went about our lives. And I think because of those two interventions, and then add Venezuela and how, quote, well that went at just kidnapping arguably a terrible guy, but another world leader, and just letting his deputy take over and things go on. We take their oil too.
I think Trump's a terrible president. I would not appreciate some foreign country sending its commandos in and kidnapping him out of the White House and taking him and putting him on trial in their country. So if you think about it that way, and I mean, I don't know, maybe some of your listeners wouldn't mind if that happened, but
my point though is all of those interventions, this guy's attacked just about he's attacked several countries no other president has, including Nigeria, I believe. And there haven't been consequences or costs to the American people. The only thing I can think of right now, 6 Americans have died. Trump doesn't care. He's looking at the curtains. Just said this is what happens. It's unbelievable. He's partying. Like, if any other president did any of those things, we would be outraged. But the thing that seems to be a game changer to some extent is if you close down that Strait of Hormuz, if oil goes up to $80 or $100 and Americans start seeing the price, then they will care. Or if there's a higher loss of life, then they'll start to care. But I'm not that cynical, but I just think that's the truth about Americans' apathy and lack of interest, and the fact that there haven't been consequences in these previous military interventions by this president. What are your thoughts?
Well, so yeah, I mean, I want to draw a line from the police occupation of Minneapolis and the sort of police state brutality of the roundups of, I mean, I was going to say roundups of immigrants, but it's just roundups of people.
They'll take anybody. Just
people who have the wrong skin hue in the wrong place. I think Americans are starting to get a feeling that this project is related and it's not a good one to live under. Like we like, I hope we like our democracy. We like our rights. There are people on the right who have some libertarianism of principle. Not a lot of them, it seems, but that's a type that exists. There are bedrock, Bill of Rights principles that we are trotting over in a way that I don't think actually has ever happened in American history, that we've had this kind of regression, right? I mean, we began as a nation with rights for some, not for all, but the arc over time has been to increase who gets those rights. And this is like I think the most acute period of backsliding.
It's a pretty big step backwards. I can't think of another time, certainly not in our lifetimes, where we took rights away. You used to think, the political argument is if you give somebody something, it's really, really hard to take it away.
The only analogy, and I don't think it's exactly analogous, is what happened in Reconstruction, right? Where briefly at the end of the Civil War, Black Americans got
our lifetime
equal rights, and then they had them taken away by Jim Crow. And maybe that's how we should see this, as an attempt to interrupt the arc of democracy. But listen, I mean, I think it's crazy that we have people in Congress who are upset about the procedures. They're basically like waving around Robert's Rules of Orders and saying like, we're really upset that you didn't ask us about this war. But like, of course, if you asked, we'd say yes. That's sort of the subtext. And like the correct position here for any American is we should not be in this war. And now that we're in it, we should stop it immediately. So if you're in Congress, you should use the power of the purse or any other power you have to stop the war now. Yes, it's very important that we go back to having a real Congress that has teeth and will exercise war powers, because as and most people who care about this issue know, it's only Congress that has the authority to declare war. You wouldn't know that based on the last 26 years.
Well, Congress has given up its authority not only on declaring war during our lifetimes, right? But I mean, the power of the purse. They've given up all authority, the Republicans in Congress, to their commander in chief. I mean, they're not doing their job as it is spelled out in the Constitution clearly.
But that's the power that exists, and I think that, I mean, this is such a radically unnecessary war, and I think the way it's going to unfold is that people are watching, and they're going to see we're the thugs, right? We, like, Americans like to think of themselves as the city on the hill, the free society that people around the world look to, that people want to immigrate here because it's such a great free place. And now we're looking around. Europe is scared of us. The Caribbean is scared of us. Latin America is scared of us, with good reason, right? They're wondering which fishermen are going to be blown out of the water by the U.S. Navy. Which country is going to suddenly find itself being bombed by America, or in the case of this war, caught in the crossfire. So we're bombing Iran, but now Kuwait and the Emirates and Saudi Arabia are having their airports bombed and their shopping malls bombed and luxury hotels and American CIA offices. But the point is, these countries didn't ask for this war, and they're caught up in it too. And this is us setting the fire. We're the arsonists in the world order. And for someone who came of age in a generation where, when I was 20, I thought American idealism was a real thing. I thought we had some juice that was, I mean, my parents emigrated to this country because it really was a better place to live than the country they grew up in. Now, it's telling that the reason for that is that there was a dictatorship in Greece that was put in place by the CIA, and that is why they left. So, it's not in a way, it's the cycle. The cycle goes around. But nonetheless, I thought we meant these things that we stand for. And I think a lot of Americans do, right? I think a lot of Americans do. Who aren't in power believe in these ideas.
Yeah, but a lot of Americans also believe in hegemony. How do you pronounce it? Whether
I would pronounce it hegemony, but I mispronounce a lot of words.
Well, however they pronounce that word, and whether or not they know the definition of it, a lot do believe in it. That hubris is a huge part of America, this generation's DNA. And I don't know why, because we keep fucking losing everywhere we go. But yet there still doesn't seem to be, again, my thesis, I guess, a cost for Americans. Do you think that this invasion there will be a cause? Everybody's talking about potential sleeper cells and terrorist attacks. They're talking about any number of issues that could affect us. Obviously, the price of gas and everything else. Do you think that Americans are going to pay any cost for our latest war that we've started?
So I think we're going to pay a lot of costs, and I think that this time we're going to connect the dots more easily than we have in the past. So I was going to find the link to share in here, but there's actually a group that's set up a cost of the war in Iran as a running ticker already. And it's in the billions, and I'll send you that link in a minute.
I'll find it.
So there is a literal dollar cost, right? That is, I think as of today, we've already spent more on the bombs we've dropped than the cost of the ACA subsidies that were withdrawn this year, right? So there is a literal opportunity cost for Americans of things we need that the government would fund, and instead we are literally blowing up that money in the form of these weapons that are being dropped. I think there's another cost that's going to be very visible to people, which is all these troops being diverted from actual security threats. So this isn't the time of right after 9/11 where the biggest threat on the horizon was Al Qaeda and Osama bin Laden. We have Russia at war in Ukraine. We have China eyeing an invasion of Taiwan. We have what I would call real traditional state threats that actually are a concern, and the reason to have a military is to be able to defend against those threats and deter powerful bad actors, and instead we are squandering all that power. So we're burning our values and our credibility, and we're also very literally putting all this material into a war of choice that strategically doesn't matter. But at the end of it, we have no interceptors left. We're going to have no Tomahawk missiles left. We're going to have lost a lot of ability and know-how and reach. And meanwhile, so we're exposed at a moment where the world is a much more dangerous place. And it's more dangerous because of things we've been doing, right? I mean, why is the world a more dangerous place today? It's because we have dismantled the system of alliances that actually was pretty good at keeping not just America, but everybody safer, right? Today, as I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, Europe is wondering if we're going to invade Greenland. That is not a good basis for shared security, right? And I like NATO. I like the EU. I like our partnership with it because, maybe bad things happen at the margins, but it means that something like World War II is less likely to happen. Today, because of Trump's set series of invasions of last year, World War III is a distinct possibility. And I hate to say that, but I think it's true.
What do you think happens in Iran right now? I mean, it is a pretty big country. It has been through obviously a lot. There have been many protesters were killed recently. But as I've heard from a lot of analysts, there's not really an apparatus to take over. If Trump says, put down your guns and you can have immunity, well, who's going to pick them up? And the person that picks them up might shoot the guy who put it down. Why would he want to put it down? None of it makes any sense at all. And I just can't figure out what could possibly happen as a result. We were led to believe that Iran was a lot stronger than Iraq. Iraq, we did a pretty bad job on and lost miserably, but Iran would be so much worse. So far, like I said, it doesn't seem to be the case.
Well, let's not confuse Iran's ability to cause long-range strategic damage to the world's most powerful military with Iran's power. The Iranian regime's power to survive and exert control domestically over its own country, right? So the Iranian state is a very institutionally deep, effective, powerful state with real administrative power and capacity, real human capital, and considerable loyalty, right? I mean, we spend a lot of our time as progressives or journalists or reformers talking to folks who don't like the regime, but there are a lot of Iranians who do like the regime, right? I mean, maybe they're 1/3 of the population, something less than half, but you know what? They're the people who are in the Basij, they're in the IRGC, they're the people who go out and beat up and kill demonstrators and have beaten back every reform movement that's happened. They're a real constituency. Those people are going to fight for the regime. And if you sort of use the Iraq lens as a cautionary tale, Iraq, which had almost no loyalty and it's in a state that was in tatters and had been in tatters for decades, was still able to generate multiple resistances, both against the U.S., but also against the new Iraqis who came to be in charge. In Iran, there's guaranteed to be a very sizable reactionary component that's going to be pro-regime, even if elements of the regime collapse. So I think in the best case scenario, we have some kind of transition that involves a lot of deadly civil strife. And I think the more likely scenario, you have something that's more like a civil war.
It sounds bad. I can't imagine the United States government, the United States military sending troops into Iran. Can you see that?
I mean, I would say in normal times, of course not. That would be insane. But I mean, we heard it from the horse's mouth. I think Marco Rubio said either yesterday or today, the president hasn't ruled anything out. Right. He hasn't ruled. He was asked about boots on the ground. He said the president hasn't ruled it out. Right. These people are so reckless. And look, they don't care about the lives and well-being of Iranians. They don't care about the lives and well-being of American soldiers and service members, right? They don't care. I mean, the cavalierness with which Trump referred to the Americans who've already died is unbelievable, right? I mean, it's like in the taxonomy of dishonorable things that have been done. It's like maybe it's not the top one because there's been such disregard for human life, but it's shocking, right? I mean, it's shocking that in an America where there is a deeply held reverence for life, at least for American life, right? Even like America Firsters or hyper-nationalists, they mourn Gold Star families. This guy doesn't. He doesn't care about Gold Star
Suckers
families.
and losers. Suckers and losers is how he sees them. Less than all the time.
And us too. I think we too, as sort of stand-in Americans, are viewed as dispensable suckers and losers in the calculus. But for now, we still have free elections in this country. I mean, that's under threat, but we do have free elections, and I do think there's an interesting and significant blowback against this utter disregard for democratic practices and for American values.
Love talking to you. Learned a lot reading your stuff before we talked, and really enjoyed this conversation. I could go on and on, but I know I've already gone too long. Let's do it again, I hope.
Yeah, great talking to you. Thanks for having me on.
To more people from the Century Foundation as well about some domestic issues and anything else. So put me in touch with folks. But we all thank you for your expertise, your wisdom, your clarity, and your moral clarity especially. I mean, I think that's a really important thing these days when we're talking to experts and analysts. And I think the point that you made at the early part of the conversation about we have to make sure that we all treat each other with a similar sense of humanity, and that too often gets lost right at the beginning of any debate and conversation, and it should be at the forefront. So thank you for centering it. Thank you for being here.
Yep. Let's stop this war. Let's get this war stopped.
Whatever we can do. Tried the last two as best I could. Got really connected to a whole bunch of veterans and their families, and that affected my life in a way that will always be indelible, will always matter a lot to me. And so I don't want to see another generation of families broken that way here or anywhere else. Thank you so much for doing this. Really appreciate you.
Take care. Thanks.
Yeah, my new friend, Thanassis Cambanis. Don't you love that guy? Wasn't he great? I think I'm going to try and make him regular. I think I might make him a regular. What do you think? What do you think about him? Go look him up. Go look at his stuff. Go watch our conversation if you want to watch on YouTube, and go support the show. It's ad-free with a paid subscription if you haven't already. I bet you have. You're a bumblebee listening all the way to the end. If you haven't, sign up now. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic. Get after it. Write a rating and review on YouTube, on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you've not done that, please do that. Subscribe on YouTube and Substack, and I will talk to you tomorrow. Go wish John Carroll a happy birthday. It was his birthday yesterday. In case you missed it, go over to Facebook if you're on there and go buy or stream his work, johncarroll.org. Be the change you want to see, and I will talk to you later.
Keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. Don't get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense and you stand up. Stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up. Stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Oh, you better stand up. Stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up. Stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up. They had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't in sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. Alright, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside. And listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.